The heaviest part of living with ongoing anxiety often went beyond the actual moments. It was the constant voice in my head replaying and saying, if you really had faith in God, you wouldn't be still struggling with this. Here's the thing nobody tells you. Anxiety doesn't just feel bad. It feels like a betrayal of your faith. I've heard do not be anxious and do not fear countless times, but none of those statements fully calmed my body. So it was confusing. Every time anxiety showed up, I automatically assumed I was doing something wrong, when in reality, my body was doing what it was supposed to. It's just I didn't have the tools to be able to intervene properly when the anxiety came up. And maybe you have felt or thought these same things. If I really trusted God, this wouldn't be happening. I know I shouldn't worry, so why can't I stop? Maybe my faith just isn't strong enough. If you've ever had those thoughts or felt like a bad Christian because your anxiety just won't leave, this video is made especially for you. So today, let's have an honest conversation about why so many Christians feel guilty about anxiety and what scripture is actually inviting us into when God says, do not be anxious. Hi there, friend. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Ashley, and I help Christians heal nonstop anxiety using Christ-centered neuroscience without the typical just pray more advice. From what I have observed, many Christians accidentally turn God's invitation into a performance standard. I'm talking about the phrase, do not be anxious, that is often quoted from scripture. And when we hear those words, our brains hear, you're not supposed to ever feel anxious. So when anxiety shows up, we conclude that we've already failed. And for years, I carried two burdens. First was the anxiety itself and not knowing what to do to get rid of it because everything I tried wasn't working. The second was the guilt and shame that came along with it. Anxiety wasn't just something I was experiencing. It became the lens through which I judged myself. And for every anxious thought, it became a reason to criticize myself. And that only took me further away from God's truth and deeper into the lies that I started believing about myself and how God viewed me in the midst of the anxiety. When that kind of thing happens, neural pathways develop around it. So now I had these neural pathways formed and they were getting stronger with each day, with each time I told myself them. And the same thing happens to you when you are experiencing guilt and shame. You see, anxiety, guilt, and shame aren't just thoughts or emotions. They involve your entire nervous system. And that is why we talk about nervous system regulation so much on this channel, because there's no way to disconnect them. They are intertwined. And so when you're talking about experiencing shame and guilt, it activates internal fear and stress responses within your nervous system. And when your brain perceives danger, whether it's physical or the possibility of failure, rejection, uncertainty, or loss, it shifts into protection mode. Shame and guilt naturally arises from a desire to protect what matters most to us and to also motivate us to behave better in the future. But a lot of times it doesn't do that. It just causes us to self-monitor and become hypervigilant. And when you're a follower of Christ, your relationship with God matters so deeply to you. You desire to fully trust Him. You desire to respond with faith instead of fear. You want to do better. That's why anxiety can feel like more than just anxiety. It feels like you failed someone, and not just anyone, God. And now you start to think that you are the failure. When we start to think like this, unfortunately, it turns into habitual self-monitoring and hypervigilance of anything that remotely looks like anxiety. And this only increases your fear and your nervous system dysregulation in response to not fulfilling the do not be anxious instruction. And once you can't fulfill do not be anxious, it turns into more guilt and shame. But that response that I just described isn't proof you've abandoned God. It's evidence that your brain believes you're unsafe. And that's an important difference. None of us can say that anxiety never is going to exist. We have to start making these distinctions because otherwise it just compounds the shame and guilt that we feel. And this leads to hiding. And what you hide will gain more power and it will draw you further away from Christ. The other part of shame and guilt is that many Christians have also absorbed this message from church environments where shame and guilt have become default ways to encourage conformity, preserve tradition and order, and uphold a certain image of what the Christian life should look like. We have become experts in using guilt and shame to lead us to obedience. But notice something throughout scripture. When he gives us instructions, he's not always describing something that we'll never experience. He's often showing us the direction that he is inviting us to move toward. The Bible is not saying don't be anxious, period. It is saying do not stay in that anxious state. Because when you're experiencing constant anxiety, this is where all of the consequences come up. Like I said, the guilt and the shame, the doubt, not coming to God, hiding, separating yourself from Him. All of these things don't come because you experience anxiety. They occur because you experience cycles of anxiety. The longer you stay in these periods, the more these side effects come up. And so these side effects are the things that affect the quality of our relationship with God. And it can even cause us to have this fear of God, seeing Him as this authoritarian being who is hard on us, who is harsh, who has large demands. It can really distort the way that you see God. You can start to see Him inaccurately, and that is also going to affect your relationship. So it's not per se the anxiety itself, it's more so about the compounded anxiety and the compounded consequences that come from avoidance. It's the aftermath. It's the continuation of the anxiety. That is often going to be the source of your distress. Those are the things that actually give us problems versus the actual anxious moment itself. God would not be giving us information about how to navigate these things if they were never going to exist in the first place. If there was no presence of anxiety, the statement, do not be anxious, would not even need to be in the Bible. God knows that it's going to happen. It's not about never experiencing fear. It's about not staying trapped in your fear. That is what God is talking about. And that's very different from pretending anxiety doesn't exist. It's actually the quite opposite. One of the biggest shifts in my healing happened when I stopped asking, how do I make this go away? And I started asking, God, will you meet me here? I'm anxious. This is where I'm at. I need you to meet me here. I was no longer hiding it from him. And instead of condemning myself for experiencing anxiety, I became curious. And God started to speak to me and say, what is your body responding to? What are you believing right now? What truth do you need to return to? What practical step can you take here? Those were the questions that pivoted me. And that experience pointed me in a whole different direction because anxiety became less about trying to make it disappear and more about learning how to care for the mind and body through the moments of human uncertainty and vulnerability that we are all going to experience. And from there, healing anxiety became about partnering with the God who created me, who intimately knows me and supports me through every life struggle. You may not want to hear this, but anxiety won't just stop on its own or by simply saying, do not be anxious. There are more steps involved, and you have to really take care of the whole body. The healing is not found in the complete absence of anxiety. It's found in accepting that it is a part of the human experience and learning how to walk through it with God. You're going to have these default human responses to anxiety. But once you stop avoiding and fighting against your own God-given mind and body, and you start caring for them, things will change. Your anxiety will lower in intensity. The guilt will begin to loosen its grip, and you'll be able to finally hear, do not be anxious, as an invitation into honest communication with God instead of condemnation. I would love to see that experience happen for you because it is so freeing. When the anxiety comes and goes, you don't feel bound to it. That shame goes away, that guilt subsides. And when you meet with God in the middle of your anxiety, you will stop feeding the cycle and begin interrupting it. You will have the tools and interventions you need to break the cycles. But as long as you're feeding anxiety, it's only going to grow and become even more dominating. So if this video felt like it was describing your story, I don't want you to leave still thinking you're failing God or that you need to keep trying harder. You can't just get over this because it is something that we have to go through in order to get to the other side. And when we don't go through it, we're engaging in that avoidance, which increases your anxiety. There's a path toward healing, but it's not the one we've been historically taught. We've been taught to suppress, we've been taught to avoid, we have been taught to shame and guilt these things away. But you can't shame yourself into healing, and you cannot heal while guilt is holding you down. These responses are helping you stay trapped in anxiety. And this inspired me to create an opportunity to help Christians understand their mind and body and learn how to restore nervous system regulation. regulation. Once you do that, you will start to see natural changes in the anxiety and the thoughts, emotions, and behaviors in relation to them. And we do this through the combination of biblical truth and neuroscience so that you can experience the kind of peace God promised us, not just intellectually, but knowing it in your mind and knowing it in your body. This is about integrating God into every part of your life, even your anxious moments. If you're wondering, how is that possible, Ashley? What could this healing look like for me? You can book a free call through the link below in the comments and description. During this call, we'll simply talk about what you're going through, where you feel stuck, and whether this would be a good fit for you. No pressure, just an opportunity to be heard and explore what your next step might be. And whether we work together or not, I hope you leave this channel knowing healing anxiety happens as we repeatedly experience God's truth, God's presence, and God's safety during our anxious moments until they begin reshaping the way we respond. We have to start seeking God's safety and not human safety. If this video has piqued your interest about what keeps anxiety going, stay tuned in for the next video because that is exactly what it talks about and how to actually begin breaking the cycle. It is more simple than you think. It is just that we have made this super complicated and we have not learned enough about our brain and our bodies to be able to intervene properly when anxiety and nervous system regulation show up. So a lot of us don't really know what to do. And so we do these adaptations or default responses that mostly we have gained from how we survived negative experiences. This video will give you some tangible, practical tools that you can start using to lessen the power of anxiety. For more content like this, subscribe to the channel. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and hit the like button. Thank you for spending time with me today. And as you go through this week, remember you are covered, seen, and loved by the Creator of all.